He thought his fortune could buy him anything. But what if it cost him everything he truly needed? 2 years after walking away from the woman he once loved, he's back, and he's about to discover a truth that will shake his world to its core. James was a man with big dreams and the ambition to match. From a young age, he'd been taught that success meant everything. His family's wealth had always kept him comfortable. But it came with a cost. A mother who controlled every choice, every relationship. She was always there, a voice that echoed in his mind, convincing him he was destined for more, but only if he stayed on the path she'd laid out for him. She'd molded him into the man she wanted, constantly reminding him of the family legacy and what he owed to their name. But deep down, James longed for a different kind of freedom, one that meant he could make his own decisions. Then there was Leah, a woman with a quiet strength and compassion that had captivated James in a way he'd never known. She loved him wholeheartedly, seeing the man behind the polished exterior, even as she faced the scorn of his family. Despite his mother's constant disapproval, Leah believed their love could withstand anything. But as James rose in his career, achieving the success his mother had always dreamed of, the weight of her influence began to press down harder. It was then that his mother gave him an ultimatum, insisting that Leah, a black woman, was a distraction, a woman unworthy of their family name. She warned James that a man like him, with wealth and a future ahead, had no room for weakness or attachments. Torn between his love for Leah and his mother's grip on his life, James made a choice that would change everything. He walked away from Leah, leaving her behind, never knowing the full weight of what he'd done or what she was about to go through. James left without a word. In his mind, he was convinced this was the only path forward, the path to greatness. The heavy words his mother had spoken lingered in his thoughts, her voice echoing even as he walked away from Leah. He told himself it was for the best, that a clean break was the only way to finally embrace the life he was meant to lead. There was no confrontation, no closure, just a single abrupt goodbye. Leah was left in silence, with nothing but questions echoing in her mind, and a heart that felt as though it had been shattered in an instant. For a while, Leah remained in that painful silence, trying to make sense of how someone she loved so deeply could disappear so quickly. Days turned into nights, and she waited for the phone to ring, for a single message that might explain why he had walked away. But each passing moment only brought her closer to a stark realization. He wasn't coming back. It was in the middle of those uncertain days, when her grief was still raw and the reality of her situation was beginning to set in, that Leah discovered something that changed everything. She was pregnant. The revelation hit her like a wave, filling her with emotions so intense that she couldn't breathe. This wasn't just about her anymore. There was a life growing within her, a child that was part of her and part of James. She was left grappling with a new reality, her heart heavy with both fear and hope. As she sat alone in her small apartment, Leah considered reaching out to him. She wondered if, perhaps, knowing about the baby would change things, would bring him back to her side. But then she remembered the way he had left, without explanation, without care. The painful memories of his abandonment rose to the surface, and with each one she knew she could not risk another heartbreak. Leah made a decision then and there. She would raise this child on her own. She would be both mother and father, providing a life of love and stability, even if it meant doing it all without him. Meanwhile, James, far removed from Leah's world, buried himself in the demands of his new life. He filled his days with work, status, and the relentless chase for success. At first, it was easy to convince himself that he'd made the right choice. He told himself that Leah had simply been a chapter in his life, one he had outgrown in his pursuit of greater things. But as time passed, he found himself haunted by memories he couldn't ignore. Moments they had shared together began to surface at the most unexpected times. The laughter they'd shared, the small gestures of kindness, the way her eyes had looked at him with trust and love. In quiet moments, these memories would strike him with an intensity he couldn't understand, and he'd find himself wondering if he had truly done the right thing. His mother's approval, once a comfort, now felt strangely hollow. And each time he revisited the thought of Leah, a pang of regret would settle in his chest, growing heavier as time went on. But he was too proud to reach out, too certain that he could just move on and leave the past behind. As James wrestled with his inner conflict, Leah was busy rebuilding her life. She didn't have the luxuries he did, nor the safety net of wealth, but she had something just as valuable: a determination to create a loving home for her child. She worked tirelessly, taking on multiple jobs to make ends meet. And as she carried her child, she found strength she hadn't known was there, a strength born out of necessity and love. Despite the challenges, she held her head high, determined not to let the past define her. Over time, Leah began to find support from unexpected places. Neighbors, friends, and even strangers came into her life, offering kindness and guidance in ways she hadn't anticipated. They became her family, her village, helping her through the long days and sleepless nights. They were there to comfort her, to share in the small victories and the challenges alike. And through these connections, Leah discovered that love and family could come from places she hadn't imagined. As the months turned into years, Leah built a life that was rich in ways she hadn't foreseen. Her child became her world, a source of joy, purpose, and hope. She found herself growing in ways that surprised her, becoming a woman of resilience and wisdom. And though she had never reached out to James, never asked for his help or his support, she knew in her heart that she had made the right choice. But James's journey was far from over. As he continued to achieve the success his mother had always wanted for him, he found himself feeling more and more adrift. He had the wealth, the respect, the status, but there was a hollowness to it all, a sense that he had left behind something irreplaceable. He tried to fill the void with material comforts, with people who admired his wealth, yet none of it could quiet the nagging feeling of loss that had taken root within him. Then one evening, as he sat alone in his luxurious apartment, a thought crossed his mind. A thought so unexpected, so powerful that it startled him. What if Leah had a child? What if, in his abrupt departure, he had left behind more than just a broken heart? The idea lingered, stirring a deep sense of unease. He tried to dismiss it, but he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to his past than he had realized. And with this thought, a spark of something he hadn't felt in years flickered to life, an urge to find out the truth. As Leah stepped into the reality of single motherhood, she faced a mountain of challenges she had never imagined. There were moments when her strength felt thin, stretched by the unyielding weight of life's demands. Nights often blurred into days as she juggled work shifts with caring for her child, sleep a distant luxury. Her small apartment, though modest, became her sanctuary, a place where love, laughter, and resilience would grow, despite the hardships that constantly tested her spirit. Leah faced endless obstacles. She often struggled to make ends meet, each month's rent a looming question mark. Every unexpected expense, every minor repair or medical bill felt like a personal trial. But she never complained, never asked for pity. For her, every sacrifice was worth it. Her child was the bright spot that guided her through the darkest days. She found herself thinking of her own mother, of the strength passed down through generations, and the ways that love and resilience had always defined her family. Outside of her home, Leah faced another challenge, one that was colder, more invisible. As a single Black mother, society often saw her through a harsh lens, one shaped by prejudice and misunderstanding. People who knew nothing of her story looked at her with judgment, assuming things about her life that were far from the truth. Some would avoid her, others would whisper. She saw it in the glances, the dismissive looks, the small hesitations that told her she was being watched, evaluated, misunderstood. Yet each day, Leah pushed forward, undeterred. With every hug, every shared laugh with her child, she reminded herself of what truly mattered. Her child's laughter was her strength. Their bond was unbreakable, a testament to the love she poured into their small family. She knew that she could not control how others viewed her, but she could control how she responded. She chose resilience, chose to embrace each day with quiet determination, focusing only on the things that mattered. And though she never spoke of him, James's presence lingered in her mind, a memory that, despite her best efforts, she couldn't completely erase. There were moments late at night when her child was asleep and the world was silent, when Leah would allow herself to feel the weight of what had happened. She would remember the love they once shared, the plans they had made, and the future that had been shattered with his sudden departure. But each time these thoughts surfaced, Leah would take a breath, remind herself of her strength, and push them back down. She had a life to build, and she would build it alone if she had to. Meanwhile, far removed from Leah's world, James found himself consumed by an emptiness he couldn't ignore. He had gained everything he thought he wanted: success, wealth, the respect of his peers. Yet as he sat in his luxurious office or his grand empty apartment, he found no comfort in the very things he had once chased so desperately. His mother praised him, spoke of his accomplishments to anyone who would listen. Yet her approval, once a goal in his life, now felt hollow, a hollow shell that echoed his growing discontent. With every success he achieved, a quiet dissatisfaction grew within him, a feeling he couldn't name. He had sacrificed so much in his pursuit of a life he thought he wanted. But now the things he had once dismissed as distractions, the laughter, the warmth, the love he had found with Leah, kept returning to him, unbidden, haunting his quiet moments. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't erase her memory, couldn't forget the way she had looked at him with trust, with hope. As time went on, James began to resent the influence his mother had wielded over his life. Her prejudice, once hidden behind words of standards and traditions, had torn him away from the one person who had seen him for who he was, not for what he represented. He could now see the extent to which her words had shaped his choices, steering him away from happiness and toward a life of empty validation. He recalled the moments she had belittled Leah, her cutting remarks disguised as concern, and how he had let those words seep into his heart, convincing himself that his love for Leah wasn't enough. In the quiet of his own mind, he began to question everything. Why had he allowed his mother's views to define his future? Why had he given up so much of himself to live by standards that were never truly his? He thought of Leah, of her kindness, her resilience, her love that had once grounded him. He found himself questioning how he could have been so blind, how he could have let go of something so real, so meaningful, for something as shallow as his mother's approval. As the months turned into years, James's discontent deepened, becoming a shadow that followed him everywhere. Every achievement, every accolade, was tarnished by the realization of what he had lost. He had traded love for status, family for fortune, and now, in the quiet of his success, he was left with nothing but regret. The life he had built no longer felt like his own. It felt like a cage, crafted from expectations and prejudice, and the more he tried to ignore it, the louder it grew, a constant reminder that he had abandoned the one person who had truly cared for him. He wondered if he could ever undo the damage he had done, if it was even possible to mend the fractures he had caused. For the first time in his life, James began to truly question who he was and what he wanted. And though he didn't yet know it, the journey he was about to embark on would force him to confront not only his past, but the choices that had defined him. It was a journey that would lead him back to Leah, a journey that would test the very core of his character, and perhaps offer him a chance at redemption. One day, as James sat in his office, surrounded by stacks of papers and business reports, a small, unassuming envelope caught his attention. Among the usual corporate documents in pristine white envelopes, this one stood out, handwritten, a bit worn, as if it had traveled a long way to reach him. There was no return address, just his name, written in a script he didn't recognize. At first, he dismissed it as a mistake, something meant for someone else, but as he held it, an inexplicable sense of curiosity began to take root. Opening it slowly, he found himself reading words that unsettled him more with each line. The letter, brief and carefully penned, hinted at a truth that seemed impossible. It spoke of a life he had left behind and the consequences of his choices, yet it held back just enough to leave him filled with questions rather than answers. At the end, one sentence stood out, haunting him with its simplicity. "You are needed." James felt his heart pound as he read and reread those words. Needed? By whom? For what? Memories of Leah came rushing back, colliding with the calm veneer he had so carefully crafted over the years. He suddenly felt the weight of all he had abandoned, everything he had chosen to leave behind. The letter had left him with more questions than answers, and he knew there was only one way to find the truth. It wasn't a decision he made lightly. He knew that returning to his past would mean facing his own mistakes, confronting truths he had buried long ago. Days turned into weeks, but the letter's words stayed with him, refusing to fade. In moments of quiet, the words echoed in his mind, tugging at something deep within him. And so one morning he packed a small bag and, without a word to anyone, got into his car and drove back to the town he had once left without looking back. As he approached the town, familiar landmarks began to appear, and a wave of nostalgia mixed with regret washed over him. Everything looked smaller, as if time itself had shrunk the once bustling places he remembered. He passed old streets he used to walk with Leah by his side, all reminders of a life he had discarded in his pursuit of success. But as he made his way closer to Leah's neighborhood, a sight stopped him cold. Just ahead, near a park he vaguely remembered, he saw her, Leah. She was standing by the edge of the playground, watching as a young child ran through the grass, laughing with the uninhibited joy only a child can have. The resemblance hit him like a punch to the gut. The child's laugh, their features. He couldn't ignore the familiar echoes he saw in that small figure. Time seemed to slow as he took it all in. He watched as Leah gently called to the child, her voice warm and filled with a love he had only experienced fleetingly in his life. It was a scene so simple, so pure, yet it carried the weight of all he had lost. The letter's words came back to him with a force that left him breathless. You are needed. For the first time he understood. This wasn't just about the life he had left behind. This was about the family he had abandoned, the connections he had severed without a second thought. Unable to move, he watched as Leah turned to look in his direction. For a moment her expression was unreadable. Did she recognize him? Did she know what he had just realized? He couldn't tell, but in that single heart-stopping instant, he knew that the life he had built was meaningless without the people he had once loved. The next few days were a blur of emotions. He returned to the town's small motel, staying close enough to catch glimpses of Leah and her child, but too uncertain, too ashamed to approach them directly. Every time he saw them, it was as if he were watching from behind an invisible wall, separated by years of choices he now regretted more than he could bear. James wrestled with how to reach out. What could he possibly say that would bridge the chasm he had created? How could he ask for forgiveness when he had walked away so easily, leaving Leah to fend for herself, to build a life for their child without any support from him? The gravity of what he had done settled over him, suffocating in its intensity. But he knew one thing for certain: he couldn't leave again. Not this time. With a mixture of determination and trepidation, he wrote a letter of his own. He spent hours poring over every word, trying to find a way to express his remorse, his regrets, and his newfound understanding of what he had abandoned. In the letter, he didn't ask for forgiveness, for he knew that wasn't something he could demand. Instead, he asked for a chance to meet, to explain himself, and to be present in the life of the child he had only just discovered. The letter was left on Leah's doorstep, and all he could do now was wait. The hours ticked by slowly, each one filled with an agonizing anticipation. He pictured Leah reading his words, imagined her reaction, a mixture of anger, disbelief, perhaps even resentment. He knew he deserved every bit of it, but the uncertainty gnawed at him all the same. And then one evening, as the sun began to set, he saw her approach. Leah, with that same grace and strength he remembered, stood in front of him, her face a mix of emotions he couldn't quite decipher. She didn't speak at first, just looked at him with a calm intensity that was far more powerful than any words. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady but carried a weight that told him everything he needed to know. "Why now?" she asked simply. James felt the question cut through him, each word a reminder of his failures. He struggled to find an answer that could capture the depth of his regret, the emptiness he had felt for years without even realizing why. But all he could manage was, "I was wrong about everything." Leah's gaze remained unwavering, her silence demanding more than empty apologies. James knew that words alone would not be enough to repair the damage he had caused, to earn her trust after so many years of absence. He stood there, vulnerable in a way he had never allowed himself to be, waiting for Leah to decide whether he deserved a place in the life he had once chosen to abandon. And so their journey began anew. Not as lovers, but as two people bound by a shared history, navigating the fragile, tentative steps of forgiveness and reconciliation. Every interaction was charged with unspoken emotions, each word a reminder of the pain and love that had once defined their relationship. There were no easy answers, no simple solutions. But for the first time, James understood that redemption would be a journey, not a destination. He knew that he would need to prove himself not through grand gestures, but through small, consistent actions, showing up, being present, and facing the consequences of his choices with humility. The road ahead was uncertain, and he didn't know if Leah would ever fully forgive him. But as he watched her walk away that evening, he felt a glimmer of hope, a faint but undeniable belief that perhaps, with time, he could find his way back to the family he had lost. As James stepped out of his car and into the quiet, familiar town, a strange unease settled over him. The streets, though changed, still held whispers of the past he'd left behind, and each step took him closer to a truth he could no longer avoid. He wandered through the town, glancing around as if expecting answers to materialize out of thin air. Yet the reality of what he sought remained elusive, tugging at him but just out of reach. And then, in an unexpected moment, he saw it. A young boy playing in the town square, laughing as he chased after a small, brightly colored ball. James stopped in his tracks, his breath catching in his throat as he took in the boy's face. There was something achingly familiar about the child's laughter, the shape of his smile, even the way he moved. It was like looking at a piece of himself, embodied in someone so small, so full of life. James felt his heart pound, a realization dawning that both terrified and thrilled him in equal measure. Could it be? Could this child be his? The boy looked up briefly, their eyes meeting across the distance. In that split second, something passed between them, a connection that felt as undeniable as it was unexpected. And yet, before James could move, the boy turned back to his game, blissfully unaware of the world-altering revelation taking place just a few feet away. Determined to understand what was happening, James made his way to Leah's home, his mind racing with questions. Memories flooded him as he reached her door, the reality of what he had done, what he had chosen to leave, finally hitting him with full force. This wasn't just about Leah anymore. This was about a child, his child, a life he had abandoned without a second thought. After a hesitant knock, Leah opened the door, her expression calm but guarded. There was no surprise in her eyes as she looked at him, no trace of the joy he remembered from years ago. She seemed older somehow, not in years, but in experience, as if life had carved resilience into her very being. Her gaze held him steady, silently daring him to speak. "Leah," he began, his voice unsteady. Is he mine?" Her expression didn't change, but there was a flicker of something he couldn't quite identify, something close to anger but wrapped in a profound sadness. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she studied him for a long moment, as if weighing the worth of the truth he was asking for. Finally, she spoke, her tone even but unmistakably resolute. "Yes, James, he's yours, but don't mistake that for an invitation back into our lives." Her words cut deeper than he had anticipated. He searched her face, hoping for a hint of forgiveness, a sliver of warmth that would soften the sting of her rejection. But there was none. Leah stood firm, her gaze unwavering as she continued. "When you left," she said quietly, "you made it clear that your ambitions, your mother's approval, mattered more to you than we ever did. I had a choice to make, for myself, for my son, and I chose a life where he would never have to feel unwanted, where he'd never be seen as a mistake or a burden." James felt a lump form in his throat, the weight of her words pressing down on him with a force he hadn't anticipated. He wanted to protest, to tell her he was different now, that he regretted leaving. But deep down, he knew those words wouldn't change anything. He had left Leah to fend for herself, without ever considering the consequences, without realizing that his absence would force her to create a life that didn't include him. Taking a deep breath, he whispered, "I was wrong, Leah. about everything. But Leah's expression didn't soften. She held herself with a strength he couldn't ignore, and her voice remained steady as she replied, "I don't need you to tell me that now, James. I needed you back then, when things were hard, when I was scared and alone. But we made it through. We didn't need your wealth, your connections, or even your name. We built a life, one filled with love and laughter, without any trace of what you left behind." James felt the full impact of her words sink in, each one striking a nerve that left him raw. He looked at her, trying to find something he could hold on to, some way to bridge the chasm between them. But Leah's face remained resolute, her strength a testament to all the battles she had fought alone, all the sacrifices she had made to give their child the life he deserved. "So why did you keep him a secret from me?" he asked, desperation creeping into his voice. Her gaze narrowed, her eyes flashing with a fire he had almost forgotten. "Because I wasn't going to let him grow up under your mother's shadow, surrounded by people who would look at him and see something less, something unworthy. I protected him from a world that would have judged him, from a family that never wanted him. That was my choice, and I don't regret it." Her words struck him like a blow, the realization settling over him that he had been complicit in something much darker than he had ever understood. He had chosen to leave her, yes, but in doing so, he had given up any right to be part of his son's life, to share in the love and joy that Leah had built on her own. "Leah," he whispered, "I know I don't deserve it, but can I be part of his life? Can I at least try to make things right?" She looked at him, her face softening just slightly, but her eyes remained guarded. "That's not for me to decide, James. It's not about what you want anymore. It's about what's best for him. And right now he's happy. He doesn't need the chaos you bring. He doesn't need the promises you couldn't keep." Her words stung, but James couldn't deny the truth in them. He had given up his place in their lives long ago, and now all he could do was watch as the life he had left behind continued without him. As Leah closed the door, he felt the finality of it settle deep within him, a quiet but profound reminder that some choices couldn't be undone, that some losses were meant to be permanent. And yet, as he turned to leave, he carried a small flicker of hope, the hope that, somehow, he could find a way back, even if it took a lifetime. James walked away from Leah's door, each step heavy with the realization that he could only earn a place in their lives through actions, through unwavering consistency, through a commitment that went beyond words. He had lost the woman he loved, had abandoned the child he never knew he had, but he understood now that redemption was not something he could claim. It was something he had to prove, step by painful step. And as he left that small, quiet town, he carried with him a resolve he had never known, a determination to build a life that, one day, his son could look upon with pride. It was a journey he knew would be difficult, filled with challenges he could only guess at. But for the first time in years, he felt a sense of purpose, a reason to keep going, even in the face of the mistakes he could never fully erase. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, the weight of the choices they had made began to take shape in the lives of James and Leah. The town that once felt so familiar to James now seemed like a canvas painted with shadows of what could have been, a constant reminder of the path he had chosen, one that led him away from love and into the arms of ambition. His heart, once filled with dreams of success, now echoed with a hollow emptiness. Each beat a reminder of the family he had lost and the child he had yet to know. In Leah's world, life continued with a rhythm all its own. Each morning began with the sun casting warm, golden light through the small window of her modest apartment. She would rise early, her heart swelling with determination as she looked at the tiny figure sleeping soundly in the next room. That was her son, the miracle of her life, a living testament to the love she had fought so hard to protect. Leah found strength in the small, everyday moments, a quiet breakfast where she sang softly to him, the joy of his laughter filling the space around them, and the way his eyes sparkled with wonder at the simplest things. But beneath that joy lay the burdens she carried, the struggles to make ends meet, the judgments she faced as a single mother, and the constant ache of longing for companionship she had once known. James, on the other hand, was locked in a battle of his own. In the opulent offices of the family business, he sat at his desk, surrounded by wealth and privilege that felt more like chains than accolades. The business meetings blurred into one another, the chatter of corporate success a stark contrast to the silence that filled his heart. Each time he smiled and shook hands with clients or celebrated a new deal, he felt a growing disconnection from the person he used to be, the person who had known joy in the simplest of moments, like Leah's laughter or the warmth of her embrace. In the quiet of his mind, memories of Leah haunted him, her smile, the way she listened, the dreams they had shared. He couldn't escape the feeling that he was meant for something more than this life of gilded cages and empty accolades. As weeks passed, James began to question everything he had once believed in. The pressure from his mother to uphold their family's legacy weighed heavily upon him. But the bright, persistent memories of Leah and their son tugged at his heart, each moment a reminder of the love he had chosen to abandon. He felt himself retreating into a cocoon of regret, where every business success felt more like a reminder of his failures as a man, as a partner, and as a father. The lavish parties, the extravagant lifestyle, none of it brought him solace. It only deepened the chasm of discontent within him. In Leah's world, though the struggle was real, there was beauty in her determination. She learned to navigate the challenges of single motherhood with a grace that amazed her. Each time she walked through the doors of her local community center, the staff greeted her with warmth and understanding. She forged connections with other single mothers, sharing stories of resilience and hope, finding strength in their shared experiences. Together, they formed a supportive network that lifted one another, encouraging their children to thrive despite the odds stacked against them. Yet as Leah worked tirelessly to build a life for her son, a shadow of uncertainty loomed over her. In quiet moments when the world felt still, doubt crept in. Was she doing enough? Would she be able to give him the life he deserved? Her heart ached with the fear of failing, but she held on to hope as tightly as she held her son. She would not let the weight of the world crush her spirit. She had learned to fight for every smile, every moment of joy. Meanwhile, James's discontent reached a fever pitch. In a moment of desperation, he found himself rummaging through old belongings, searching for a piece of his past that might guide him. He stumbled upon a box filled with photographs, pictures of happier days, of moments shared with Leah, each image a reminder of a life he had once cherished. Among them, he found one photograph that caught his breath, a candid shot of Leah laughing, sunlight catching in her hair, her eyes sparkling with joy. In that instant, he realized the cost of his choices. The warmth of her laughter had been replaced by the chill of regret, and he was left grappling with the reality that he had turned his back on the very essence of love. James knew he had to make a choice. The longing for connection, for the love he had let slip away, ignited a fire within him. He couldn't bear the thought of Leah and their son living a life without him, a life that was full but missing a vital piece. So he made a decision. He would return to the town he had once fled, ready to face whatever consequences awaited him. He understood that seeking redemption wouldn't be easy, but he was determined to prove that he could be the father his son deserved and the partner Leah had always needed. As James drove back to the town, the familiar landscape unfolded before him, a backdrop of memories that weighed heavily on his heart. Each mile brought with it a mix of anticipation and dread, a reflection of the emotional journey he had embarked upon. Would Leah welcome him back, or would she close the door once again? Would his son even recognize him, or see him as a stranger? The questions raced through his mind, but one thing was clear. He was ready to fight for the love he had once cast aside. In Leah's home, as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the floor, she felt a shift in the air. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but there was a sense of change, a feeling that something monumental was on the horizon. She couldn't shake the thought that James might return, that he might want to reclaim his place in their lives. The idea filled her with a mixture of hope and apprehension. She had built a life without him, a life that brought her joy and fulfillment, but the scars of their past ran deep. As night fell, Leah found herself reflecting on her journey, the trials and triumphs that had shaped her into the woman she was today. The memories of James remained, tangled in her heart, a reminder of love lost but never forgotten. She knew she had made the right choice in raising their son alone, but the thought of confronting James, of allowing him back into their lives, was daunting. Could she trust him after all that had happened? In the depths of their respective struggles, both Leah and James were poised on the brink of a confrontation that would change their lives forever. Each carrying the weight of their choices, they stood at a crossroads, ready to face the truth of their shared past and the uncertain future that awaited them. The tension hung in the air, an electric charge that promised to unleash a torrent of emotions, a reckoning that would reveal the depths of their love and the power of forgiveness. And as the night deepened, a sense of anticipation lingered, a palpable moment before the storm. The journey they were on would demand everything from them: vulnerability, honesty, and the courage to face the truths they had both avoided for too long. They were on the precipice of a reunion, one that would either bring them closer together or tear them apart once more. But one thing was certain: the love they had shared was far from extinguished, and its embers still glowed brightly, waiting for the right moment to ignite once more. As soft music played in the background, punctuating the emotional peaks of their individual journeys, viewers were drawn deeper into the complexity of their lives. The visuals danced between Leah's nurturing moments with her son and James's contemplative solitude, each scene a poignant reminder of the love that had once united them and the battles they were now fighting alone. In the climax of their story, with the music swelling to a crescendo, the stage was set for the reunion, one that would unveil the raw emotions that had been simmering beneath the surface, a moment where love and heartache intertwined, promising to leave an indelible mark on both their lives. As the sun rose on the day following their emotional confrontation, a sense of renewal filled the air, as if the world itself was holding its breath in anticipation of what was to come. James and Leah stood at a crossroads, their hearts heavy with the weight of their past but hopeful for the future that lay ahead. The air between them was thick with unspoken words, and as they settled into the uneasy silence, both sensed the monumental shift that had occurred. They were no longer just two people caught in a web of misunderstanding and resentment. They were a family navigating the complexities of their intertwined lives. Leah, her heart pounding, looked at James with a mix of apprehension and determination. She had faced countless challenges on her journey as a single mother, and the last thing she wanted was to allow old wounds to reopen. Yet despite the hurt, she felt an undeniable flicker of something else, an opportunity for healing, for growth, and perhaps even for a new beginning. As she gathered her thoughts, Leah spoke, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "Forgiveness is given, but trust must be rebuilt." Those words hung in the air, a simple yet powerful acknowledgement of the path they needed to walk together. James, his eyes glistening with tears, nodded, fully understanding the weight of her statement. He knew that forgiveness was a gift, but rebuilding trust would require effort, honesty, and a commitment to change. The years of distance and silence between them had created a chasm that would not be easily bridged. He felt the enormity of his actions, the hurt he had caused Leah, the absence he had forced upon their son, and he was prepared to face the consequences. This was his moment to prove that he was not just the man who had walked away, but someone who could learn from his mistakes. As they began to navigate the complexities of co-parenting, Leah set boundaries that were clear and firm, ensuring that James understood the importance of respect and consistency. She welcomed him into their son's life, but not without caution. She wanted to protect her child from the uncertainty that had marred her own childhood experiences. James listened, absorbing every word, knowing that he had to show Leah that he could be reliable. He began to take small steps, attending school events, spending time with his son, and doing his best to support Leah in any way he could. Throughout this process, Leah discovered a renewed sense of strength within herself. She had always been resilient, but now she was also empowered by the fact that she had stood her ground, refusing to settle for anything less than she deserved. With each passing day, she found joy in her interactions with James, not as a romantic partner, but as a co-parent, both committed to raising their son with love and understanding. The tentative beginnings of friendship emerged, built on mutual respect and a shared goal of fostering a nurturing environment for their child. James, in turn, embarked on a journey of self-discovery. He started to reevaluate the values he had once held dear, recognizing the danger of allowing prejudice and societal expectations to cloud his judgment. The wealth he had pursued so relentlessly felt less meaningful when compared to the warmth of family connections and the laughter of his child. With Leah's forgiveness came a profound realization. True success was not measured by financial gain, but by the relationships we cultivate and the love we share. As the seasons changed, so did their relationship. James worked tirelessly to rebuild the trust Leah had rightfully placed in him. He learned to listen more, to be present in ways he had never understood before. Leah observed his efforts with cautious optimism, recognizing the sincerity in his actions. They began to share parenting responsibilities, celebrating milestones together, and fostering an environment filled with laughter and joy. Their son flourished in this atmosphere, thriving in the love that enveloped him from both parents, a living testament to their commitment to family. And yet, amid this transformation, the lingering shadows of prejudice and judgment began to dissipate. James's mother, who had once exerted such control over his decisions, found her influence waning as he stepped into his new role. The lessons he learned about family and self-worth became evident to those around him. He started to reject the notion that material wealth defined success, openly discussing his new perspectives with those who would listen, including his mother. This shift created tension, but it also offered an opportunity for growth, both for him and for his family. The moral takeaway from this journey is profound and clear. The road to self-discovery is often fraught with challenges, but it is also a journey filled with the potential for redemption and renewal. Leah and James's story illustrates the dangers of allowing prejudice to dictate our lives, to cloud our judgment, and to sever the bonds that matter most. It is a reminder that family, whether by blood or by choice, should always be valued over material wealth. Their experiences highlight the importance of vulnerability, the power of forgiveness, and the strength found in rebuilding trust. In the end, Leah and James emerged not as two individuals lost in their past, but as a united front, committed to raising their son with love, respect, and understanding. Their journey demonstrates that while mistakes may haunt us, they do not have to define us. With courage and compassion, we can all find our way back to one another, learning along the way that love is worth fighting for, and that family is the greatest treasure of all. As the story closes, viewers are left with a sense of hope, a belief that no matter how far we stray, the path home is always illuminated by the light of love and forgiveness. As we reflect on Leah and James's journey, we invite you to become part of this unfolding narrative. Throughout their story, the themes of forgiveness, trust, and the struggle against the societal prejudices resonate deeply. But what about you, the viewers? As we reach a pivotal moment in their tale, we want to hear your thoughts. Imagine yourself in Leah's shoes. Would you have been able to forgive someone who had abandoned you in your most vulnerable moment? Would you have opened your heart again to the person who left? Think about the complexities of love and loss and share your insights with us. Would you have forgiven him if you were Leah? Comment below and let us know your thoughts. And as we approach the conclusion of this story, let's ponder James's transformation. Was his journey of self-discovery a reflection of true change, or was it merely a desperate attempt to reclaim what he lost? Did he deserve a second chance, or had he waited too long to make amends? These questions linger, prompting us to consider the nature of redemption and whether it can truly be earned. What did you think of James's journey? Was it too late, or did he deserve a second chance? Share your opinion in the comments below. Your engagement matters as it brings life to the narratives we share and fosters a community of reflection and discussion. We encourage you to connect with one another, to explore the different perspectives that arise from Leah and James's experiences, and to consider how their story may mirror challenges we all face in our own lives. As we conclude this poignant tale of love, redemption, and life lessons, we invite you to join us for more. If you enjoyed this story and found value in the lessons it presents, make sure to subscribe to Shadows and Light. We bring you daily dramatic and moral stories that touch the heart and stir the soul, offering reflections that resonate beyond the screen. Your support helps us continue sharing these powerful narratives, So don't miss out on what's to come. Together, let's explore the shadows and light of human experience.